Welcome, lovely viewers, to another exciting video. Hello and a warm welcome to our channel. Today, we're delving into guerrilla warfare. Thumbprite guerrilla warfare during the Peninsular War by Roque Gameiro, depicting a Portuguese guerrilla ambush against French forces. Guerrilla warfare is a form of unconventional warfare in which small groups of irregular military, such as rebels, partisans, paramilitary personnel or armed civilians, including recruited children, use ambushes, sabotage, terrorism, raids, petty warfare or hit-and-run tactics in a rebellion, in a violent conflict, in a war or in a civil war to fight against regular military, police or rival insurgent forces. Although the term guerrilla warfare was coined in the context of the Peninsular War in the 19th century, the tactical methods of guerrilla warfare have long been in use. In the 6th century BC, Sun Tzu proposed the use of guerrilla-style tactics in the art of war. The 3rd century BC Roman general Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus is also credited with inventing many of the tactics of guerrilla warfare through what is today called the Fabian strategy. Guerrilla warfare has been used by various factions throughout history and is particularly associated with revolutionary movements and popular resistance against invading or occupying armies. Guerrilla tactics focus on avoiding head-on confrontations with enemy armies, typically due to inferior arms or forces, and instead engage in limited skirmishes with the goal of exhausting adversaries and forcing them to withdraw. See also attrition warfare. Organized guerrilla groups often depend on the support of either the local population or foreign backers who sympathize with the guerrilla group's efforts. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting etymology and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. Thumbprite Spanish guerrilla resistance to the Napoleonic French invasion of Spain at the Battle of Valdivia. The Spanish word is the diminutive form of war, hence, little war. The term became popular during the early 19th century Peninsular War, when, after the defeat of their regular armies, the Spanish and Portuguese people successfully rose against the Napoleonic troops and defeated a highly superior army using the guerrilla strategy in combination with a scorched earth policy and people's war. See also attrition warfare against Napoleon. In correct Spanish usage, a person who is a member of a unit is a if male or a if female. Arthur Wellesley adopted the term guerrilla into English from Spanish usage in 1809 to refer to the individual fighters, e.g., I have recommended to set the guerrillas to work, and also as in Spanish to denote a group or band of such fighters. However, in most languages guerrilla still denotes a specific style of warfare. The use of the diminutive evokes the differences in number, scale, and scope between the guerrilla army and the formal, professional army of the state. In this chapter, we'll be shedding light on history and its role in shaping our understanding. Thumbprite Soviet partisans on the road in Belarus, 1944. Counter-offensive prehistoric tribal warriors presumably employed guerrilla-style tactics against enemy tribes. Evidence of conventional warfare, on the other hand, did not emerge until 3100 BC in Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Chinese general and strategist Sun Tzu, in his The Art of War 6th century BC, became one of the earliest to propose the use of guerrilla warfare. This inspired developments in modern guerrilla warfare. In the 3rd century BC, Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus used elements of guerrilla warfare, such as the evasion of battle, the attempt to wear down the enemy, to attack small detachments in an ambush, and devised the Fabian strategy, which the Roman Republic used to great effect against Hannibal's army. See also His Excellency, George Washington, the Fabian choice. In the medieval Roman Empire, guerrilla warfare was frequently practiced between the 8th through 10th centuries along the eastern frontier with the Umayyad and then Abbasid caliphates. Tactics involved a heavy emphasis on reconnaissance and intelligence, shadowing the enemy, evacuating threatened population centers, and attacking when the enemy dispersed to raid. In the later 10th century, this form of warfare was codified in a military manual known by its later Latin name as De Velitation Bellica, on skirmishing so it would not be forgotten in the future. The Normans often made many forays into Wales, in which guerrilla warfare was used against them. The Welsh used the mountainous region, which the Normans were unfamiliar with, to spring surprise attacks. Since the Enlightenment, ideologies such as nationalism, liberalism, socialism, and religious fundamentalism have played an important role in shaping insurgencies and guerrilla warfare. In the 17th century, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, founder of the Maratha Empire, pioneered the Shiva Sutra Organami covered guerrilla tactics to defeat the many times larger and more powerful armies of the Mughal Empire. Keralavarma Pashasi Raja 1753–1805 used guerrilla techniques chiefly centred in mountain forests in the Koshot War against the British East India Company in India between 1793 and 1806. Arthur Wellesley in India had commanded forces assigned to defeat Pashasi's techniques, but failed. It was the longest war waged by East India Company during their military campaigns on the Indian subcontinent. It was one of the bloodiest and hardest wars waged by East India Company in India, with Presidency Army regiments that suffered losses as high as 80% in 10 years of warfare. Thumba Siege of the Fortals of San Luis by the Dominican rebels by Melanio Guzman. The Dominican Restoration War was a guerrilla war between 1863 and 1865 in the Dominican Republic between nationalists and Spain, the latter of which had recolonized the country 17 years after its independence. The war resulted in the withdrawal of Spanish forces and the establishment of a second republic in the Dominican Republic. Thumba Praita seen Hogon's flying column of the Irish 3rd Tipperary Brigade. During the Irish War of Independence, the Moroccan military leader Abd el-Krim 1963 and his father unified the Moroccan tribes under their control and took up arms against the Spanish and French occupiers during the Rif War in 1920. For the first time in history, tunnel warfare was used alongside modern guerrilla tactics, which caused considerable damage to both the colonial armies in Morocco. In the early 20th century, Michael Collins and Tom Berry both developed many tactical features of guerrilla warfare during the guerrilla phase of the Irish War of Independence. Collins developed mainly urban guerrilla warfare tactics in Dublin City, the Irish capital. Operations in which small Irish Republican Army IRA units 3 to 6 guerrillas quickly attacked a target and then disappeared into civilian crowds frustrated the British enemy. The best example of this occurred on Bloody Sunday 21 November 1920, when Collins's assassination unit, known as the Squad, wiped out a group of British intelligence agents. The Cairo gang. Early in the morning, 14 were killed, 6 were wounded. Some regular officers were also killed in the purge. That afternoon, a Royal Irish Constabulary force consisting of both regular RIC personnel and the Auxiliary Division took revenge, shooting into a crowd at a football match in Croke Park, killing 14 civilians and injuring 60 others. In West County Cork, Tom Barry was the commander of the IRA West Cork Brigade. Fighting in West Cork was rural, and the II fought in much larger units than their fellows in urban areas. These units, called flying columns, engaged British forces in large battles, usually for between 10–30 minutes. The Kilmachael ambush in November 1920 and the Crossberry ambush in March 1921 are the most famous examples of Barry's flying columns causing large casualties to enemy forces. Thumba Praita Lakdari, Drif, Bowhid and Bowley. Algerian women guerrillas of the Algerian War of Independence. C. 1956. The Algerian Revolution of 1954 started with a handful of Algerian guerrillas. Primitively armed, the guerrillas fought the French for over 8 years. This remains a prototype for modern insurgency and counterinsurgency, terrorism, torture, and asymmetric warfare prevalent throughout the world today. In South Africa, African National Congress ANC members studied the Algerian War prior to the release and apotheosis of Nelson Mandela. In their intifada against Israel, Palestinian fighters have sought to emulate it. Additionally, the tactics of Al-Qaeda closely resemble those of the Algerians. The Mutibaini Bengali translates as Freedom Fighters or Liberation Army, also known as the Bangladesh Forces, was the guerrilla resistance movement consisting of the Bangladeshi military, paramilitary and civilians during the Bangladesh Liberation War that transformed East Pakistan into Bangladesh in 1971. An earlier name Mukti-4 was also used. In this section, we'll be exploring theoretical works. The growth of guerrilla warfare was inspired in part by theoretical works on guerrilla warfare, starting with the Manual de Guerra de Guerrillas by Matas Raman Mella written in the 19th century. More recently, Mao Zedong's on guerrilla warfare, Che Guevara's guerrilla warfare, and Lenin's guerrilla warfare were all written after the successful revolutions carried by them in China, Cuba, and Russia, respectively. Those texts characterized the tactic of guerrilla warfare as, according to Che Guevara's text, being used by the side which is supported by a majority but which possesses a much smaller number of arms for use in defense against oppression. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting Foco theory and exploring its implications in greater detail. In the years, the Marxist revolutionary Che Guevara developed the Foco theory of revolution in his book Guerrilla Warfare, based on his experiences during the 1959 Cuban Revolution. This theory was later formalized as Focoism by Regis Debray. Its central principle is that vanguardism by cadres of small, fast-moving paramilitary groups can provide a focus for popular discontent against a sitting regime, and thereby lead a general insurrection. Although the original approach was to mobilize and launch attacks from rural areas, many Foco ideas were adapted into urban guerrilla warfare movements. In the next portion, we'll be immersing ourselves in the realm of strategy, tactics, and methods and examining its broader implications. Thumba Praita Bow guerrillas during the Second Boer War in South Africa. Thumba Praita, Estonian forest brothers relaxing and cleaning their guns after a shooting exercise in Veskiaro, Jõgeva County, Estonian SSR, in 1953. As we enter this new phase, let's analyze strategy from different angles and evaluate its significance. Guerrilla warfare is a type of asymmetric warfare, competition between opponents of unequal strength. It is also a type of irregular warfare, that is, it aims not simply to defeat an invading enemy, but to win popular support and political influence, to the enemy's cost. Accordingly, guerrilla strategy aims to magnify the impact of a small, mobile force on a larger, more cumbersome one. If successful, guerrillas weaken their enemy by attrition, eventually forcing them to withdraw. The spotlight now falls on tactics as we delve deeper into its details. Tactically, guerrillas usually avoid confrontation with large units and formations of enemy troops but seek and attack small groups of enemy personnel and resources to gradually deplete the opposing force while minimizing their own losses. The guerrilla prizes mobility, secrecy, and surprise, organizing in small units and taking advantage of terrain that is difficult for larger units to use. For example, Mao Zedong summarized basic guerrilla tactics at the beginning of the Chinese Civil War as: the enemy advances, we retreat; the enemy camps, we harass; the enemy tires, we attack; the enemy retreats, we pursue. At least one author credits the ancient Chinese work The Art of War with inspiring Mao's tactics. In the 20th century, other communist leaders, including North Vietnamese Ho Chi Minh, often used and developed guerrilla warfare tactics, which provided a model for their use elsewhere, leading to the Cuban Foco theory and the anti-Soviet Mujahideen in Afghanistan. With the foundation laid, let's embark on a journey into unconventional methods. Guerrilla groups may use improvised explosive devices and logistical support by the local population, thereby using the population as a human shield. The opposing army may come at last to suspect all civilians as potential guerrilla backers. The guerrillas might get political support from foreign backers, and many guerrilla groups are adept at public persuasion through propaganda and use of force. Many guerrilla movements today also rely heavily on children as combatants, scouts, porters, spies, informants, and in other roles. It has drawn international condemnation, but many states also recruit children within their armed forces. Get ready for an exciting exploration as we unravel the mysteries of comparison of guerrilla warfare and terrorism. There is no commonly accepted definition of terrorism, and the term is frequently used as political propaganda by belligerents, most often by governments in part to denounce opponents whose status as terrorists is disputed. While the primary concern of guerrillas is their enemies' active military units, terrorists largely are concerned with non-military agents and target mostly civilians. I hope you learned something new today. Let me know what you found most interesting in the comments below.